contributing yourselves, and your videos are optional. So, confession, I just had to look back at the text from yesterday that we read. I was a little confused. We read a little story. The Alchemist told Santiago a story, and it's about a Roman emperor. I forget his name. And the emperor had lived a very good life. And when he went to heaven, the angel greeted him and said, okay, you've done so well in your life. What is, I can grant you one wish. What would you like? And he said that he wants to, I think, his son wanted to be a poet while he was living. And he wanted to see his son successful reading his poetry. Okay, and that's where it gets a little fuzzy for me. So he got to hear his son's poetry, but the context was a little bit off. I'm still kind of stuck on this story. I think what it comes down to is there was a healing moment, and he said, all you have to do is say the word, and my son will be healed. And so I think that word is love. Honestly, guys, this is a pretty tricky book. And that was not a very good summary, but I did my best. So I have a feeling that we're probably going to finish the book today. There's just a few pages left. But next week, before we do like a final wrap-up activity for The Alchemist, I will kind of go through and try and summarize each section, each part. I promise I'll do a better job. That was awful. All right, here we go. So we're on 159 today. I think there's like 160. Yeah, there's 163 pages in this book. So let's finish this. Woohoo! All right, so the Alchemist said that little story that I will work on tomorrow to Santiago, and they said goodbye. And so Santiago is off to the pyramids to figure out if his treasure is real and if he can get it. Oh, and then the Alchemist gave Santiago some gold. All right, the boy rode along through the desert for several hours, listening avidly to what his heart had to say. It was his heart that would tell him where his treasure was hidden. Where your treasure is, there will also be your heart, the Alchemist had told him. But his heart was speaking of other things. With pride, it told the story of a shepherd who had left his flocks to follow a dream he had on 2 different occasions. It told of personal legends and of the many men who had wandered in search of distant lands or beautiful women, confronting the people of their times with their preconceived notions. It spoke of journeys, discoveries, books, and change. As he was about to climb yet another dune, his heart whispered, be aware of the place where you are brought to tears. That's where I am, and that's where your treasure is. The boy climbed the dune slowly. A full moon rose again in the starry sky. It had been a month since he had set forth from the oasis. The moonlight cast shadows through the dunes, creating the appearance of a rolling sea. It reminded the boy of the day when that horse had reared in the desert, and he had come to know the Alchemist. And the moon fell on the desert silence and on a man's journey in search of treasure. When he reached the top of the dune, his heart leapt. There, illuminated by the light of the moon and the brightness of the desert, stood the solemn and majestic pyramids of Egypt. The boy fell to his knees and wept. He thanked God for making him believe in his personal legend, and for leading him to meet a king, a merchant, an Englishman, and an alchemist. And above all, for his having met a woman of the desert who had told him that love would never keep a man from his personal legend. If he wanted to, he could now return to the oasis, go back to Fatima, and live his life as a simple shepherd. After all, the alchemist continued to live in the desert, even though he understood the language of the world and knew how to transform lead into gold. He didn't need to demonstrate his science and art to anyone. The boy told himself that, and on the way toward realizing his own personal legend, he had learned all he needed to know and had experienced everything he might have dreamed of. But here he was, at the point of finding his treasure, and he reminded himself that no project is completed until its objective has been achieved. The boy looked at the sands around him and saw that where his tears had fallen, a scarab beetle was scuttling through the sand. During his time in the desert, he had learned that in Egypt, the scarab beetles are a symbol of God. Ooh, so this brings us back to ancient Egypt in social studies when we were learning about mummification. And oftentimes, pharaohs had a scarab beetle. I think it was like over their heart, like as a part of their mummy wrappings. So there's some symbolism right there. Awesome. Another omen. The boy began to dig into the dune. There we go. As he did so, he thought of what Crystal Merchant had once said, that anyone could build a pyramid in his backyard. The boy could now see that he couldn't do so if he placed stone upon stone for the rest of his life. Remember, they took 20 years, so he'd be there for a while. Throughout the night, the boy dug at the place he had chosen but found nothing. He felt weighted down by the centuries of time since the pyramids had been built. But he didn't stop. He struggled to continue digging as he fought the wind, which often blew the sand back into the excavation. His hands were abraded and exhausted, but he listened to his heart. It had told him to dig where his tears fell. As he attempted to pull out the rocks he encountered, he heard footsteps. Several figures approached him. Their backs were to the moonlight, and the boy could see neither their eyes nor their faces. Uh-oh. What are you doing here? One of the figures demanded. Because he was terrified, the boy didn't answer. He had found where his treasure was and was frightened at what might happen. We're refugees from the tribal wars and we need money, the other figure said. What are you hiding there? I'm not hiding anything, the boy answered. But one of them seized the boy and yanked him back out of the hole. Another, who was searching the boy's bags, found the piece of gold. There's gold here, he said. The moon shone on the face of the Arab who had seized him, and in the man's eyes, the boy saw death. He's probably got more gold hidden in the ground. They made the boy continue digging, but he found nothing. As the sun rose, the men began to beat the boy. He was bruised and bleeding. His clothing was torn to shreds, and he felt that death was near. Oh, this is dark. I didn't see this coming. What good is money to you if you're going to die? It's not often that money can save someone's life, the alchemist had said. Finally, the boy screamed at the men, I'm digging for treasure! And although his mouth was bleeding and swollen, he told his attackers that he had twice dreamed of a treasure hidden near the pyramids of Egypt. The men who appeared to be the leader of the group spoke to one of the others. Leave him. He doesn't have anything else. He must have stolen this gold. The boy fell to the sand, nearly unconscious. The leader shook him and said, We're leaving. But before they left, he came back to the boy and said, You're not going to die. You'll live, and you'll learn that a man shouldn't be so stupid. 2 years ago, right here on this spot, I had a recurrent dream too. I dreamed that I should travel to the fields of Spain and look for a ruined church where shepherds and their sheep slept. In my dream, there was a sycamore growing out of the ruins of the sacristy, and I was told that if I dug at the roots of the sycamore, I would find a hidden treasure. But I'm not so stupid as to cross an entire desert just because of a recurrent dream. And they disappeared. The boy stood up shakily and looked once more at the pyramids. They seemed to laugh at him, and he laughed back, his heart bursting with joy, because now he knew where his treasure was. Oh, what time is it? Okay, 3 minutes. There's a little epilogue here. Guys, so it's not about the end goal, the end destination. It's about the journey. I know it's so cliche, but honestly, that's kind of the point of this book. That's the huge theme that we just came to. I do want to analyze that, but I also would like to read this epilogue. It's just 3 pages. Okay, epilogue. The boy reached the small abandoned church just as the night was falling. The sycamore was still there in the sacristy, and the stairs could still be seen through the half-destroyed roof. He remembered the time he had been there with his sheep. It had been a peaceful night, except for the dream. Now he was here not with his flock, but with a shovel. He sat looking at the sky for a long time. Then he took from his knapsack a bottle of wine and drank some. He remembered the night in the desert when he sat with the alchemist as they looked at the stars and drank wine together. He thought of the many roads he had traveled and of the strange way God had chosen to show him his treasure. If he hadn't believed in the significance of recurrent dreams, he would not have met the gypsy woman, the king, the thief, or, well, it's a long list. But the path was written in the omens, and there was no way I could go wrong, he said to himself. He fell asleep, and when he awoke, the sun was already high. He began to dig at the base of the sycamore. You old sorcerer, the boy shouted up at the sky. You knew the whole story. You even left a bit of gold at the monastery so I could get back to this church. The monk laughed when he saw me come back in tatters. Couldn't you have saved me from that? No, he heard a voice in the wind say. If I had told you, you wouldn't have seen the pyramids. They're beautiful, aren't they? The boy smiled and continued digging. Half an hour later, his shovel hit something solid. An hour later, he had before him a chest of Spanish gold coins. Yeah. There were also precious stones, gold masks adorned with red and white feathers, and stone statues embedded with jewels, the spoils of conquest that the country had long ago forgotten, and that some conquistador had failed to tell his children about. The boy took out Urim and Thummim, those two darn stones, from his bag. He had used the two stones only once, one morning when he was at a marketplace. His life and his path had always provided him with enough omens. He placed Urim and Thummim in the chest. They were also a part of his new treasure because they were a reminder of the old king, whom he would never see again. It's true. Life really is generous to those who pursue their personal legend, the boy thought. Then he remembered that he had to get to Tariffa so he could give 1/10 of his treasure to the gypsy woman as he had promised. Those gypsies are really smart, he thought. Maybe it was because they moved around so much. The wind began to blow again. It was the Levanter, the wind that came from Africa. It didn't bring with it the smell of the desert, nor the threat of Moorish invasion. Instead, it brought the scent of a perfume he knew well, and the touch of a kiss that came from far away, slowly, slowly, until it rested on his lips. The boy smiled. It was the first time she had done that. "I'm coming, Fatima," he said. Can you imagine? Oh, wow. Those are some of the best last words of a book I have read in a long time. All right. I'm off to go conference with Ethan and whoever else wants to join or needs help with literally anything. Thanks for taking the time to be on here, guys. If I don't see you, have a great rest of your weekend. Let me stop recording this before I forget.